when you have advised and like prepared and done everything you can to get a prime minister ready for a moment like that, and then they hop on that big call or like walk into that big meeting and it's out of your hands and it's all on them, like, what is the thing that you worry about the most in that moment?
Sweating through my clothes. If I'm
So fair.
it's
Yeah.
like I don't want to take off my blazer because you're just going to see a soaked blouse underneath or something.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's this moment of like there's nothing you can do. It's out of your control. So if things do start to go awry in real time and you're either listening in or you're in the room or whatever, you kind of just start planning the next steps of how you're going to mitigate the whatever fallout there is.
Hello, I'm Rachel Gilmore, your least favorite person's least favorite journalist. Welcome to Bubble Pop, the show where we talk about the biggest headlines and juicy tidbits so you don't have to doom scroll. Today, I am extremely stoked to share that we have a real political whiz with insider intel and a kick-ass sense of humor on the show. Supriya Dwivedi is a former senior advisor to then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and she is going to help us break down all of the political chaos of the last week. With, I'm hoping, a healthy amount of gossip into what these things look like behind the scenes. I am extremely excited to have her on the show. Supriya, welcome to Bubble Pop.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I'm very excited. I've actually been secretly coveting having you on the show for a while now. I just was waiting for the right week, and it feels like enough political news has happened that it's a good one.
Oh, has stuff happened? I didn't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe one or two things. So yeah, it has been quite the week. Let's start by winding the clock back a little bit. What did you make of the election result? What was your reaction on, I guess it was more like election morning that we found out for sure, but what did you make of it?
Do you mean the overall result, or do you mean Pierre Poilievre losing his seat? Because those are two very different
I am
things.
going to ask you about that
Okay.
very specifically. I was like, do I start with that question though, or should I maybe warm her up? So let's go big first, and then I definitely really want to hear your reaction to the Poilievre stuff.
So I mean, it was really interesting because when I was when I saw the results myself, when I had woken up, and I read the news headlines and was getting the final count tally or whatever, and there were still a few, ridings that had yet to be determined, whether it was going to be a strong minority or if the Liberals had eked past that majority mark. And I was like, oh, this is great news. This is great news for the country. This is great news for Liberals. We should be very proud of this result, particularly considering where we would have been just a year ago or even 6 months ago, 5 months ago, right, in terms of polling. And then I started talking to actual capital L Liberals, and a lot of them were being kind of majorly depresso about the result. And
Really?
I was like, guys, you realize even if we don't edge past the majority mark, this is very strong in terms of a seat count and in terms of just what the Liberals were able to do in terms of cobbling sort of a new kind of voter coalition, more seats in Quebec, seats in the West, et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of the issue that some capital L Liberals would have had, partisan Liberals that were either involved directly in the campaign or peripherally, is that a lot of folks had their heart or had their goal set on a majority. So anything short of that was just, and that's very Indian tiger parenting to me. I'm like, guys, an A- is still good just because it's not an A or an A+. Be proud. And I think a lot of that has worn off, thankfully. But so I just noted that it was a little bit of a weird vibe, initially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting how much they got excited about the idea of a majority when that's just the idea of them even winning felt unthinkable of, months ago. And I don't know, I guess it's just maybe a competitive thing, but because I feel like a lot of people in politics, particularly on that sort of more strategic campaign aspect, can get a little competitive.
It's that. And I wonder if some of it was a bit of overselling from some of the more senior folks on the Carney team to some of the more junior mid-level folks in terms of what they were expecting or what they were seeing in terms of Liberal seat modeling and whatnot. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, vibes are all good now. So now it's
that's good.
Put your head down, get to work sort of thing,
Yeah. Okay, speaking of vibes and seats, What was your reaction when you saw like
It
walk
was
me through the night? Like, were you refreshing the riding result? I know I was,
I,
but
I I was, but to be honest, like I went to sleep. I wasn't like up
that's
super
so
late or
fair.
anything. I was like, I have a kid. Like she was sick that day. I was like, oh,
Oh,
whatever, you
yeah,
know. So, but when I woke up and I was like, oh man, Bruce Vanjoy pulled it off. Like he won. This is amazing. And then I was just going through all of the moments that I had in my head where I would have been in the lobby of the House of Commons as my former boss, Justin Trudeau, would have been on the floor of the House of Commons for PMQP, so Prime Minister's Question Period, as he's getting, lobbed by all sides, but particularly the Conservatives. And I was just like, this is amazing. For the most petulant, terminally online leader that I think, we've had, not just for the Conservatives, but in like, modern political parties. Um,
yeah,
it's I don't know, it's nice. You shouldn't take things for granted, and I think he took the folks of Carleton for granted, and assumed he was going to win, assumed he could get by on I guess vibes or shit posts or what have you. And it's been really interesting to see some of the reaction from the constituents, which were like, well, we never even saw him in the riding, or like
yeah,
the only memory they would have had of him was like bringing coffee and donuts to the convoyers. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So like not the best kind of rep, I think, for an Ottawa, half suburban, half rural riding.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not leaving though. I have to say it feels very on brand that he wouldn't leave, but like what do you make of that he's staying on trying to cling to the leadership?
So
And it seems like the caucus is mostly behind him for now.
yeah, I don't think it's weird that he's doing it. Like I understand
Okay.
the sort of inclination and visceral reaction for people to be like, well, he lost his seat, he didn't win the
Yeah,
popular vote, like dude's got to go. They did increase their seat count,
they did.
and they also cobbled together, much like the Liberals did, a really new, interesting sort of voter coalition, right? But more than that, I would say the reason why Pierre is sort of the right guy to stay on in this moment is what you said. Like caucus is largely behind him, but more than
Yeah.
caucus being behind him, I would say he really does represent the modern conservative movement in Canada, which is terminally online and perpetually aggrieved. Um,
Yeah.
and there are all sorts of issues that come with that when your base is perhaps a little bit more to the right than the vast majority of voters or the country is. And that's how you get high on your own supply, and you think that folks love you as much as your own echo chamber does. Um, but I don't know. I certainly can't imagine a moderate Tory leader leading this caucus and leading this party when you've got like folks like Aaron Gunn and Jamil Javani and Andrew
Yeah.
Lawton in the mix, right? Like these aren't moderate conservatives. These are, you know, very much to the right of center conservatives.
Yeah.
And they need a late leader who's going to match that.
Yeah. And one thing, it's interesting that you talk about that because one thing I'm finding really interesting is the way that people are talking about Polyev needing to pivot a bit. And like a lot
Yeah.
of it is also predicated on the assumption that he can pivot, which I find really I feel like that's kind of a big assumption to make after he spent the last like 2 years attacking trans people, attacking the media, telling people, that they're going to be forced to eat bugs if the liberals win and stuff like that. Like, do you think that there's a road back for Polyev that could ultimately see him win the election? And do you think that pivoting in that way is A, part of that road, and B, possible?
So I think there is a reality or a timeline in which whatever he can cobble together and form government. There's no question in my mind that he can do that. I mean, think of how close they were just this time around, even with
Yeah.
losing the popular vote, right? What I will say is that I don't think it comes with a hard pivot. And the reason why I say that is because folks can smell when you're being inauthentic. And say what you will about Pierre Polyev, he is authentic. He is authentically himself. He is
He really
authentically
is. Yep.
petulant. He is authentically a shit poster. You know what I mean? And so I think if he were to do a hard pivot and try and go the route of, let's say, an Aaron O'Toole or like a Jean Charest or somebody, he
Yeah.
wouldn't be true to himself. And I think folks would be able to pick up on that. I think what he can do and what he should have done during the campaign is pivoted in terms of his messaging. Like your messaging can't all be about the carbon tax when the carbon tax is gone, and it can't all be about, Trudeau when Trudeau is also gone. Um, and I find it very interesting that in a campaign environment where this like hyper nationalism from Canadians was, bubbling up from all sorts of corners, the Conservative Party was unable to convert that into votes. You can't instill like a national pride and like, beefing up our military, beefing up service to your country. Like these should have been bread and butter conservative issues. But Carney and the Liberal team really adept, were quite adept at like snatching the rug from under them and making it all about Canada strong and elbows up and standing up to Trump.
Yeah. I'm glad that you actually kind of did the transition for me because I did want to ask you about, how Carney kind of branded himself in the election and the fact that he really tried to brand himself as different from Trudeau.
Yeah.
And he is definitely more right-leaning than his predecessor. But was there anything that Carney did during the campaign that you personally were surprised by?
I don't know, surprised would be the right word. And I guess this was before the campaign, so I don't know if it technically counts. But I mean, I was surprised that he cut wage. So
Yeah.
women and gender equality, like I was very surprised that he had cut that. I found it to be a bit of an odd move, especially when there were cabinet roles given in terms of for the whip and for House Leader when Parliament wasn't even sitting. So you have ostensibly two cabinet roles around that cabinet table that don't really have a role, but you cut a ministry that is very important to a lot of folks. And arguably, now that we have the data in, it's shown that women are the ones who propelled Liberals to victory. So you may want to give them a ministry, like
Yeah.
so that would be one of them. And then the other thing that I found somewhat surprising is just his whole down with Webster
I
like
know he
like the
loves
fact that he's
them.
actually like really into them. Like I would have figured, I don't know, like a
I feel like
good
he like
surprise.
I would have thought he listens to like classical music,
Yeah,
like
same. Or
he listens to music that doesn't have lyrics. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, totally. Or like just all he listens to are like economists, like podcasts or something like that. I don't know, but I was
Yeah, like I don't really do music. I don't get anything from it.
yeah, yeah,
I'm just if
exactly.
I can't learn. Yeah. Oh my
I
God, that's really funny.
it was similar to, I think you had said this after he had done his Jon Stewart hit, like, before the leadership or whatever, where you're like, Carney has Riz? What? Like,
I know,
you
it
know?
shocked me. But he is
Yeah.
actually kind of funny, which is
Yeah.
like it's throwing me. I saw him speak at Canada 2020 like before when the media was definitely trying to like I had already started joking that the media views him as our next prime minister and
Yeah.
like because it was just like the Globe and Mail especially was just running so many pieces. And they were right in the end that Carney was like had these ambitions and stuff. But I watched him in Canada 2020 and I felt like my eyes were like glazed over the entire time. And it was just like an incredibly boring conversation. And I was like, oh God, it'll be another like Ignatieff situation. And I was wrong. Like mea culpa on that. Like he's got a little bit of humor. So that's kind of nice to see.
He's got humor. And again, like the Conservatives either seemed gun shy on attacking him on a few things, but I don't know. Like it just, nothing landed. It was bizarre. Because to your point about the Ignatieff thing, I don't know, they didn't really do a lot of, he didn't really come back for you. They tried to hammer him
Yeah.
with the Justin stuff more than anything. Um, I would have gone the super elite, rich, out of touch guy route. I
Yeah.
don't know why they didn't do that, but
Yeah.
it was right there for the taking.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like maybe they I don't know. It speaks to the inability to pivot, right? That we were talking about. Like
Yeah.
the fact it felt like they were like the conservative machine is like an ocean trawler or something that like you have to slowly like groaning get it to turn instead of it
Yeah.
being like adaptive like that. But yeah, and on the wage thing, I found that surprising too. And I think a lot of folks, especially in like the trans community and stuff, were like feeling really shocked by that because it's a time when that file is really, really important because of the way that that community is under attack. And I think that that was a bit of a if not red, like at least yellow flag. So I'll definitely be watching the cabinet announcement. Although taking next week off. But when I'm back, I will definitely be keeping my eyes peeled for that. Okay. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about Trump
Yeah.
because you just like can't escape it. Carney used very careful language with him, like words that kind of have double meanings, like transformational, that like Trump took well. But
Yeah.
like, I just thought that was so funny. And I wanted to ask you, like, based on your experience working behind the scenes, and I know that you have like your specific files and stuff that you were kind of more focused on, but based on just your knowledge working behind the scenes with a prime minister, to what degree is like each word carefully chosen in that kind of an interaction?
With Trump, every single word is very carefully chosen,
Oh, yeah.
simply because you have to simultaneously be thinking about not just playing to the home crowd, which in this, it's Oval Office, right? Nobody wanted to get Zelensky'd in that
Yeah.
moment. And nobody wanted to be seen as though Trump was, walking all over Carney or walking all over Canada. So I would imagine there were a few key messages that were drilled into Prime Minister Carney prior to him even walking in there, in terms of what he needed to do and what he needed to not do. And the transformational as a word is perfect because, of course, if you're Trump or his team, you're like, yeah, I'm a transformational president. Like, I look at all these things I've done. And if you're Canadian or if you're a non-Trump supporter, you're like, well, yeah, of course he's transformational. Look at everything he's transformed. Everything's topsy-turvy. So the double
Yeah.
entendre there, I think, was quite smart. And I think Kearney and the senior folks around him should feel very, very good and proud for the visit to DC that they just had.
Yeah, I think our mutual friend Phaedra made a really funny TikTok about this, just saying like, "Oh, did you hear that sound? That was 40 million Canadians just like letting out a sigh of relief."
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was so funny. You know, I do wonder too, like what that feels like. I mean, when you have advised and like prepared and done everything you can to get a prime minister ready for a moment like that, and then they hop on that big call or like walk into that big meeting and it's out of your hands and it's all on them. Like, what is the thing that you worry about the most in that moment?
Sweating through my clothes. If I'm
So fair.
it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to take off my blazer because you're just going to see a soaked blouse underneath or something.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's this moment of like, there's nothing you can do. It's out of your control. So if things do start to go awry in real time and you're either listening in or you're in the room or whatever, you kind of just start planning the next steps of how you're going to mitigate the whatever fallout there is, or thinking about who needs to get on the phone with whom, from our team to their team to sort of smooth things over. But to be honest, a lot of it is just like, you know, being very, it's like an out of body sort of experience because like you're not the one that's doing anything, right? And it's out of your control. So it's like it should be zen, but it's not because you're still worried. So it's a weird kind of like push and pull sort of thing. But you're definitely very aware that, in a moment's notice, everything that you prepped for can just essentially, be blown to smithereens, particularly when dealing with a U.S. administration that tends to fly by the seat of their pants.
Yeah. I can't imagine. Like the only thing that I can think of is how it feels to watch someone you really care about do something that they're very nervous about. Like, I don't have kids, but like maybe watching like a kid's recital or like,
Oh, yeah.
but with way like higher stakes.
Yeah,
Although
yeah.
depending on the recital, I guess, But yeah, it must be so stressful. I did want to ask you, like, now that you have worked behind the scenes in politics at like the highest level that you can, was there anything that you learned that you kind of wish that the public, because like you were a broadcaster before, you like did what I'm doing right now. And like, I'm wondering if there's anything that you wish the public knew about this work.
I would just say that there's a lot that the public doesn't necessarily know because of secret or top secret classification on things that folks are working on behind the scenes that just can't ever really be talked about. So often if you're reading something and this isn't like, I'm not one of these don't trust journalists, don't trust the papers. That's not what I mean at all.
Yeah,
But
no,
like
of course.
often if you're reading something about like, if it's classified information or there's like a leak that's happening, Um, Often it's either inaccurate because it's like tidbits of information that are no longer up to date, or it ends up being half of the story where it's like, yeah, that's sort of partially true, but then there's a other big giant piece that's been missed and that isn't being accounted for in any of this. So it's like, and that's one aspect. And then the other aspect I would say that is interesting that the public probably doesn't know about is just like the machinery of government and like how things work, like the actual processes involved. Like bills don't just magically become passed, particularly in a minority government, right? Like you need the committee to be on board, you need to find another partner to propel the legislation through. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens just from a process point that, I sort of ostensibly knew about it, like knowing what the whatever, but you don't actually appreciate how long and arduous things can be until you're in the thick of it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. On what you said about like not getting the full picture too as the media, that's something I've personally been interrogating a lot in this really insane time we're living through because, like to give you an example, watching the meeting in the Oval Office, the 51st state thing didn't have to necessarily come up, it felt like, until a
Yeah.
reporter asked about it. And, it's weird. And like you've worn both of these hats, so I'm really curious for your take on this because I don't have a fully formed opinion about it yet either, because it's like a new thought for me. As journalists, I think the inclination is to get as much information as possible and to just like ask all the questions and you can't hold back. And, who are you to be the arbiter of what people
Mhm.
deserve to have asked and not, And so like, and I do still believe that, but I do sometimes wonder in these like sensitive situations and when it comes to things like national security reporting and things like that, like what is the balance when it comes to like actually being cognizant of the impact that your reporting and your questions has on these like very tenuous, very stressful, very high stakes, like geopolitical or just even domestic situations? Like where do you feel the responsibility of journalists and media lies in that balance as someone who's done both?
So I would say that one thing that the political media tends to suffer from quite a bit, not just in this country, but basically everywhere in the Western
Yeah.
world, is this whole like under the guise of objectivity, you're printing both sides, no matter what the situation, right? And
Yeah.
this doesn't necessarily always apply to like a national security aspect or perspective, but it's like if there's an issue and something is objectively demonstrably right and something is objectively demonstrably wrong, you don't actually have to print both things. You don't have to give
Yeah.
both things. One side can just be right, and you can say the other side says this, and then follow it up with what the wrong part is, or why they're wrong, or what the nuance or the context is to make it perhaps not as correct as the other side is seemingly pushing it to be. But I think we do readers and the audiences just in general a huge disservice when we present things as, well, it's this or it's this, and we don't know what it is, but it could be either, and here you go, when we actually do know what it is, or we have inclinations of what it is. I think your audience is not served by dumbing things down for them and not telling them proper context and nuance and things. And like I like a few examples come to mind, but you'll remember when there was a motion to condemn Islamophobia. It was a very
Yeah.
asinine motion, right? Not a bill, just a motion. And it got turned into, you know, this whole thing about how the liberals were going to criminalize any criticism of Islam. And this was being repeated by like conservative members of parliament. It was being repeated by conservative columnists, by conservative talk radio hosts. And this is just, again, demonstrably false. Like we don't have to play that. And yet we do. And the result is a lot of Islamophobia that ends up happening. Like Ikra Khalid, who was the MP who introduced that motion, in the first few months of introducing it, she had something like 90,000 emails in her inbox that were all hate emails. Rachel, that's an insane number. Like
Jesus.
it's just so I don't know. Like that's kind of I guess where my whole thing is, but I think some old school journalists will tell you, and this is probably true, is that journalism wasn't meant for veracity, it was meant for accuracy. So they want to fact check the time and place something is happening, but not necessarily what's being said is whether it's true or not. And that's like, a real challenge, I think, going forward, because again, in the olden times, people used to be embarrassed when they got caught in a lie, Rachel, especially politicians. And
Yeah. No,
that's
not
just,
anymore.
it's no longer the case. Yeah, there's no shame, there's no humility, there's no embarrassment.
Yeah.
And so there's no there's no real punishment for lying. And I don't know how an entire, like, how the media deals with that, but we're gonna have to figure it out.
I totally agree. It's something that like I feel like doing this little like doing an indie media project, I guess, for lack of a better word, I grapple with like a ton. Because I feel like there's a huge flaw that can be exploited by bad actors in avoiding. I think what the media falls into a lot is avoiding the perception of bias over
Yeah,
avoiding actual bias, if that makes sense. So it's like, you don't want to be seen as if one person's saying the grass is red and the other person's saying the grass is green, you don't want to be seen as favoring the people saying that the grass is green. So you make sure to like carefully massage and, be kind to the feelings of the grass is red people. But, that's wild because the grass is red people, just because they yell a lot online about the grass really being red, doesn't make it red. So it's a
totally.
whole thing. Yeah.
And like maybe in that piece, when they're talking about the grass is red, they could maybe explain that chlorophyll actually makes it green or whatever, and like that's why.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you get it exactly. So I don't know. It's a tough thing, and I think it's a harder thing. With something like grass, that's easier than politics. When a lot of it is, there's a level of subjectivity to a lot of like theories about how the world works and how economics work and geopolitics. So it's tough. But okay, this is like also my personal interest, so I have to like cut myself off because probably not everyone listening is super interested in like the grappling of like how media works. But I did want to ask you something about when you decided to go and work for the Prime Minister's
Mhm.
office. You wrote a really powerful op-ed for the Star that like it blew me away. Like it was so well written and it was so powerful. And I'm gonna make you like a little uncomfortable for a second because I'm gonna read like 3 sentences of it so that the readers have the context. But one thing that you said in that piece was, having held memberships for both the Conservative and Liberal parties in the past, I'm not an overly partisan person. The toxic hyperpartisanship that currently plagues Ottawa is normally the type of environment I would actively avoid. Fair. I'm preferring instead to chirp from the sidelines as a columnist and pundit. But I also think a lot about what my daughter will be like when she's older, when she inevitably asks me what I did after her dad died. I need the response to be more than, well, kiddo, I chirped real good from the sidelines. There is too much at stake to not get directly involved, which is why I am joining the Prime Minister's office as a senior advisor. Can you tell me a bit about what you were thinking about when you wrote that and what you view the stakes as
Yeah.
that drove that decision?
So it's gonna be a long answer. I'm sorry in
That's
advance.
so fine.
So
Take it. Wait, it's a podcast. Take as much time
yeah,
as you need.
yeah. So let me just
Yeah.
rewind, I think, a little bit to give folks context. So,
Yeah.
in January of 2023, my husband, Anoop, I was 40 years old, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. In July of 2023, he had passed away. In that short period from January to July of that year, I watched in real time his algorithms, whether it was on YouTube or Instagram, slowly yet surely, and not even really that slow, because I mean, we're talking about a 7-month period, but very quickly change from, here are some recipes for green juice that will help curb your nausea while you're undergoing chemotherapy, because the algorithm had already picked up on the fact that he had cancer, um, to go from, here is a crystal that will treat your stage 4 cancer, or here is a experimental whatever unregulated drug that the doctors don't want you to know about, or big pharma doesn't want you to know about, just send x amount of dollars here and we'll send it to you. And it was, I had worked in the space of like big tech algorithms and online harms in my role at McGill University Center for Media Technology and Democracy, where you and I started cross paths a
Yep.
little bit there too.
Yeah.
Um, and so I knew about it from an academic sense, but just to watch, Anoop's feeds go in real time to that was was very disheartening. It was very difficult to have those conversations with, the love of your life, or the father of your child who's dying, why this crystal treatment isn't going to work and why we should stick with the, prescribed treatment by his team of physicians. And to add to that, 2 years prior to my husband being diagnosed with cancer and then passing away, his older brother, Vikram, died. There's only one person that died in Ontario from the AstraZeneca vaccine, and it was my brother-in-law, Vic. And I, again, think quite a lot about algorithms and how they shape these people's worldviews and what they believe in. And a lot of what I was getting from the anti-vax community when they first found out that Anoop died, without knowing anything about Vic, is that he had died from turbo cancer that was caused by the vaccine. And just given everything about my background, given everything about what had happened in my family, it would be so much easier, Rachel, for me to believe that Anoop actually did die from turbo cancer that was caused by the vaccine. I would have a clear villain, I'd have a clear
Yeah.
reason, and I'd be able to explain to my daughter, who was 4 at the time when he passed, she's 6 now, very succinctly why her father passed away and why, that now I'm a single parent. But I mean, that's not what happened. It's shitty genetics, it's shitty luck, whatever it is. Like, it's not from that. And I wanted to ensure that these behemoth companies that are owned by, arguably techno fascists, don't control our information flow. And I think there's an aspect of like sovereignty to it, that we shouldn't have these giant American companies that determine what information you're receiving, and how you're getting that information, to what degree you're being pummeled with something, as well as, just if you're looking at it from the kid's perspective, like, why are we allowing these foreign companies to prey and make money off our kids? Like, I think it's very unfair that a kid right now in Europe or in the UK, because they have a Digital Services Act in the EU, and the UK has their Online Safety Act, that arguably a kid in either of those jurisdictions is much safer online than a kid in Canada, because for some reason we're beholden to some weird narrow American view of speech, like, it's I don't know. So that was my main impetus for joining, was to get some sort of semblance of online harms legislation passed and to regulate some of the AI aspects, to put up guardrails. But then Parliament was prorogued, so everything died on the order paper. So
Yeah.
I just sincerely hope that, Prime Minister Carney and his team are serious about um, putting forward just smart regulations. And again, like, this whole notion that it's a binary, you either have free speech or regulations, is bullshit. Like, you can do both. And by the way, it's not free speech to have a billionaire decide what content you see based on how angry it makes you or based on how much it engages you, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Totally. Um, you kind of already answered one thing I wanted to ask you about this, but like maybe you could expand a little bit on like what do you want to see from the folks who have picked up your fight since you left PMO, the Prime Minister's office? Like, do you feel optimistic that it will be picked up? And what are you hoping to see?
So I'm not an optimistic person by nature, Rachel. Just
That's so
I'm,
fair.
I'm always glass half empty at best.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I don't know if they're picking up the same fights. I sincerely hope that they are going to. I
yeah,
sincerely hope that the folks around Prime Minister Carney recognize that, you know, the large social media platforms are harming our children, that it's creating a lot of divisiveness and a lot of polarization that doesn't need to be there. That AI, particularly as it pertains to generative AI, or these, character driven chatbots where kids can start up relationships with these chatbots and there are no
yeah.
guardrails, like, it, it's just, these are wholesale not good and we need to do something about it. But I worry with so much focus on and rightfully so. I don't want to downplay tariffs. I don't want to downplay the economic uncertainty that a president like, President Trump brings to Canada and to Canadians.
Totally.
Um, but we can walk and chew gum. I think we're pretty good at that. I think Prime Minister Mark Carney is incredibly intelligent, and the folks around him are smart. So they should be able to recognize that there are certain things that we shouldn't negotiate. And under this whole elbows up, whatever mantra, like elbows up to these, 3 or 4 billionaires that control our entire information flow. Like they shouldn't have a say on what Canadians get to see. And right
Yeah.
now, they control it.
100%. Yeah, I was a little bit nervous when I read the aspect of the Liberal platform about like pushing for more adoption of AI. Like it made me a little itchy because I just think that there's a lot of snake oil in the
Yeah.
AI world. So I do hope like that Mark Carney isn't leaning too hard into the kind of Starmerism. Keir Starmer out of the UK, who's like very into AI and like, it just I that's one thing that makes me nervous. So I'll definitely be watching for that too. What did you make of that in the platform?
Yeah, I was worried about that too. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think every government wants to leverage AI for efficiency purposes, right? Like, are there
Yeah.
roles, are there things that AI can be doing, particularly when it comes to things like service delivery, right? So, like,
Yeah.
if you're a Canadian and you're looking for something, like, like, a good example, like when Anoop passed away, I had to like go on like several different sites. I had to contact, every single bank. Like, why don't these systems talk to each other? Why do I have to, like, if the Ontario government knows that he's passed away, why is there something different that needs to happen for if I'm getting a passport? Like, why do I need a different type of death certificate or what have you? Like little things like that I think are quite beneficial. But the whole scale, like AI will save us, is I think a bit of a pipe dream. And I think we Canadians and folks writ large should be very skeptical of uh, whether they're tech bros selling you it or a politician selling you it. AI isn't some magic bullet that's going to, fix everything for everyone. And I think we should really question how much, particularly when we're talking about generative AI, just how much power it sucks up, how much energy it sucks up. What is it
Totally.
actually doing for society right now? And then folks should question, okay, well, all this efficiency should surely mean we get more leisure time, right? Like, has that happened at any point in history? At any point in history, have we moved from a more efficient technological, like when we moved from landlines to cell phones, did we all of a sudden get a shorter work week? No. When we moved from, modem internet, like the internet
Wow, that was a good
to,
impression.
yeah, thanks, to whatever, like high speed fiber optic, whatever we have now, nobody works less. So nobody's working fewer hours on average. Like it's, so we should question when a bunch of rich people try and sell us these technologies under the guise of, but it'll make your life easier. And it's like, will it, or will it
Yeah,
make just rich people even that much richer?
exactly. That was exactly what I was going to say. Like, or will it just make the billionaires more rich and then they can, I don't know, use it to exploit us all more and more?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on from this topic, I do just want to like make you uncomfortable with praise for a second, because I do just want to say that it is so inspiring the way that you took like genuinely one of the shittiest things that can happen to a person and a family and turned it into something to try to make the world better for everyone else. And I just have so much respect for you. And I think you're a really incredible
Aw,
person. I know. I know I'm
thank
such
you. Yeah.
I'm like a little like crybaby today, but I just like, I genuinely am really astounded by you. And I think you should be really proud of yourself. And I just wanted to say that before we move on.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so since we got really heavy, I want to ask you something stupid.
I
Uh,
love it.
what was one of the most like ridiculous or funny things that you saw while working in PMO? And for the folks listening, PMO is Prime Minister's Office. I know I've said that a few times, but I don't want to do that Ottawa thing where we say a ton of acronyms
Yeah,
and
yeah,
no
that's
one knows
smart.
what we're talking about.
So, I mean, there's so many just funny, ridiculous moments of levity. Okay, I will say this because there's a picture of it, so folks know that it happened.
Yeah.
The day that Christopher Freeland decides she's going to give my former boss, less than a half hour heads up that she's resigning day of Fez and everything. Everybody, all the journalists are in lockup. It's a huge
Fez is the full economic statement, by the way.
Sorry, we just said we weren't going to do that. Yeah.
It's okay.
And that night, what folks who aren't inside the, Ottawa bubble may not have realized is that night was the Laurier Christmas party. And that's the night where the leader of the Liberal Party goes to all of the high roller Liberal donors as a thank you for a Christmas party, and he had his speech. And so nobody, I think, had laughed that entire day. I don't think a single person had cracked a smile in, the senior team, the speechwriters, whatever. And we're in the backstage area or whatever for him about to go out to give his speech to the Laurier Club. And he finished giving his speech, everybody's sitting quiet. And it looked like, I don't know, it looked like a funeral in there. And my parents got divorced when I was quite young. I was 3. And so, and I'm the younger, I have an older sister, but I'm the youngest in my family. And I very much have a divorced kid vibe insofar as I like to make people laugh in uncomfortable situations. And so
I feel that to my core. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. And so I just, I don't know what took, I just stood up and I was like, okay, boss, show me how to do a proper right hook. And I just got in stance and position. And there's this picture of me and him where he's like, no. He's like, put your weight on your back foot. And Adam Scotty, the Prime Minister's photographer, grabbed that moment. And it was, and you see in the background, Katie Telford, who's the chief of staff, is sitting on the couch behind us. And she's like this, her head in her hand, laughing. And afterwards, she was like, I think that was the first time I'd laughed all day. Thank you for that.
Aww.
And I was like, yeah, well, that's
and
personality hire. That's what I'm here for.
Hey! You are so much more than a personality hire, but you absolutely bring that energy. And Did you punch him? Did you punch the Prime Minister?
I didn't, but he did at one point say to me that he was worried I was going to, because I still wear my wedding ring, that I was going to, if I was going to fake clock him. He's like, you can't give me a black eye before I go out.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay, Supriya, I think I've stolen enough of your time today, but before I let you go, I do just want to first of all, I'm going to ask you to promote yourself and tell people where they can find you, but we'll get to that in 1 second, because before I do that, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think people should know, or you just want to soapbox for a second about? I just want to give you the floor for a second if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you want to say.
My own rant? I would just say that I think more people need to just get involved in politics. Everything is political.
100%.
There's, for folks that say well, I'm apolitical or I don't really like getting involved. If you look at the shit show that is question period in the House of Commons, I can understand why you want to disengage or you're not that. But politics isn't that. A lot of good work gets done at committee, right? Which is perhaps not as sexy as some of the, other debates or some of the more high profile things, but your local riding association matters, right? Your local candidate matters. And so again, not the sexiest pitch, but everything is indeed political. And more people should get capital P political about things, because it's all well and good to chirp on the sidelines. But sometimes to actually make the difference, you need to get your hands a little bit dirty.
Totally. I always say, even if you don't care about politics cares about you.
Totally.
It's going to affect you. So yeah, why not have a say in it, right? Okay, Supriya, where can people keep up with you if they want to keep listening to your hilarious banter and divorce kid energy?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram at Sups Dwivedi. I'm still on Twitter for some reason at Supriya Dwivedi. And I'm on BlueSky at Supriya. So folks can find me there. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Supriya. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Rachel.
Of course. Thank you for listening to this episode of Bubble Pop. I'm Rachel Gilmore, your least favorite person's least favorite journalist. Just a little programming note. I'm actually going to be away next week. I'm taking the week off to try to have a little rest before Parliament comes back and all the chaos starts anew. So I will not be posting an episode next week, but after that, I will be back with your regularly scheduled programming. And I'll also be a year older because my birthday is May 19th. Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to Bubble Pop on YouTube, Patreon, Substack, and wherever you like to listen. You can also find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, and BlueSky. I'd like to say a special thank you to Hans Vivian Wenzel for creating the incredibly groovy music for Bubble Pop. You can find more of his stuff under Spotify under the artist name Hans, lowercase h with an exclamation mark. Thanks again for spending this time with me. Doing this is a dream, and I could not do it without your support. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.